Snow is falling in the Westfold, but it does not land as snow for long. It hisses on hot stone, on splintered shields, on the slick black blood that runs in the ruts of the road. Men scream in two tongues. Horses rear, eyes white, nostrils full of ash. Beyond the dark line of pines, a horn answers a horn that should never have been answered. And on a ridge above the Isen, a wolf banner rises beside the white horse. If you want more Middle-earth turned sideways like this, help the tale travel. Leave a like, subscribe for the next divergence, and tell the host of this story where you are watching from. The comments become a map, and every map needs voices to fill its empty places. The ridge is called by many names. To the Rohirrim, it is a scar at the edge of their grass, where the river Isen cuts cold and swift before spilling into the fenlands. To the Dunlendings, it is the old threshold, the place their grandfathers crossed with hungry cattle and sharp words, and were driven back by spears and riders, and a hatred that learned to breathe like a living thing. Tonight, that hatred is told to hold its breath. Below, the first line of Uruk-hai comes on in disciplined silence, their iron-shod boots drumming the frozen ground, their pikes tilting forward as one. Torches bob along their flanks like a chain of malignant stars. The smell reaches the ridge before the sound does. Tar, sweat, the sour stink of flesh that has been penned too close for too long. Behind them roll wagons piled with ladders and crude engines, and behind those, a dull red glow stains the low clouds where Isengard burns in its furnaces. The Rohirrim on the ridge are not many. Their mail is patched, their cloaks stiff with sleet. They clutch spears and look down at the river as if the river itself has decided the shape of their graves. Their captain, a young lord of the mark with his helm under his arm, watches the enemy with a face that has not yet learned to hide fear. Theodred, son of Theoden, hears his own breath loud inside his skull and hates himself for hearing it. Then footsteps crunch behind him, cautious and heavy. They are not the quick steps of a rider. They are the measured tread of men who do not trust the open. He turns, and his hand goes to his sword, and for a heartbeat the world becomes only cold air and the memory of old raids. A man steps forward into the pale light. He is broad, wrapped in a wolfskin that still smells of animal fat. His beard is plaited with small bones. Around his neck hangs a bronze torque scored with spirals. He holds no weapon in his hands, but a dozen spear points rise behind him like a bristling hedge. Their eyes are dark. Their faces are weathered like river stones. The captain of the Dunlendings bows his head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, as one chieftain to another. "My name is Frithwin," he says in the common speech, thickly, as if each word has to be carved from his mouth. "Saruman the White has taken our sons for his pits. He has burned our winter stores. He has sent orcs through our cattle pens to teach us obedience." Theodred feels the ridge tilt under him, as if the world has shifted on a hinge. The Dunlendings have not come with Saruman. They have come to speak against him. Behind Theodred, an older marshal spits into the snow. "Words," he says. "Wolf words." Frithwin turns his head slightly, listening. He does not flare. He does not bark. He looks tired. "I have brought proof." At a gesture, two Dunlendings drag forward a third figure, bound at the wrists, stumbling, his feet bare in the snow. The captive lifts his head, and the torchlight catches his face. A man of Dunland, yes, but with an ugly black brand on his cheek, the white hand of Isengard burned into skin. His lips are cracked. His eyes are fever-bright. He was a recruiter, Frithwin says. He took our boys to Orthanc with promises. He brought back only coin and lies. Now, he says, Saruman will give us the mark when the horse lords are dead. He says Saruman will make us kings over your graves. The captive laughs, a dry sound. He will, he rasps. He will. He will grind you to chaff. The marshal takes a step forward and raises his sword as if to end the argument with one stroke. Theodred lifts a hand, and the marshal stops, surprised to be commanded. Theodred studies Frithwin. The chieftain's eyes do not flick to the Uruk-hai below. He is not here to bargain from strength. He is here because something behind him is worse. How many? Theodred asks. Frithwin breathes out, and in that breath is an entire people making a choice that will stain generations. More than you think, fewer than you need. The river below murmurs, indifferent. In Edoras, far to the east, a candle gutters in the draughts of Meduseld. The golden hall smells of old smoke and new sickness. Theoden King sits heavy in his chair, and the shadow at his back is not only the shadow of the high seat. Grima, son of Galmod, stands close, whispering, his voice like oil poured over a blade. The Westfold is burning, Grima says softly, as if the words are a comfort. Your son is brave, but bravery is not a wall. Theoden's fingers tighten on the carved arms of the chair. His knuckles are swollen. His eyes are dimmed, but somewhere behind the dimness, a king hears a horn that is not sounded in this room. He hears it as an ache. At the doors stands Eowyn, white-handed, watching, listening to every word that is not meant for her. Her face is calm because it has been forced to be calm for too long. When Grimmer speaks of Dunland, his lip curls. Those hillmen, he murmurs. They have always hated us. Eowyn remembers, as a child, being told stories of raids and burned homesteads, of cattle driven off under moonlight. She remembers her uncle's jaw clenching at the name. She also remembers, in quieter moments, old men at the hearth admitting that their own fathers had ridden west and taken land, had pushed a people back into cold hills, and called it justice because they could. What does an old wrong become when a new wrong arrives wearing iron and bearing a wizard's seal? A rider comes into Edoras at dawn, his horse lathered, its flanks streaked with ice. The man's breath steams as he stumbles into the hall. He falls to one knee, and for a moment, Theoden sees not a messenger, but a ghost. My king, the rider says. At the fords of Isen, the Dunlendings have come to fight beside the mark. Grima laughs, too loud. Beside? He repeats. Or among, with knives ready for your son's back. The rider lifts his head. I saw them, he says hoarsely, and they raised their spears against the Uruk-hai. They took arrows meant for our men. They dragged our wounded back from the river. Theoden's eyes sharpen by a fraction, as if a curtain has stirred. Grima steps closer to block that sharpening. A trap, Grima whispers. A lure. Let them bleed for you, and then they will claim the Westfold as payment. Eowyn sees Theoden's hand tremble. She sees his gaze drift to a tapestry on the far wall, a white horse running under a green sky. She knows that if he chooses wrong now, the tapestry will become only a memory. In the west, on the ridge above the Isen, the first turning point arrives not with a speech, but with the first clash of bodies. The Uruk-hai reach the river and drive into it without hesitation. The Isen, swollen with winter melt, bites at their legs, but they do not slow. Arrows fall among them, thudding into black shields, hissing into water. Theodred shouts, and his men surge down the slope, spears levelled, the familiar rhythm of the mark returning to their limbs. Then, from the other side of the ridge, the Dunlendings run. They do not run like riders. They run like men who have fought in narrow passes, in rain that never stops. They come in a thick wedge, shields of wood and hide held tight, axes raised. Their war cry is not the shrill hate the Rohirrim expect. It is a deep-throated chant, an old sound that seems to come from the hills themselves. Uruk-hai meet them and are surprised, for Saruman has taught them many things, but not this, the bitter hillmen refusing his hand. Steel strikes steel. The river becomes a grinding place of limbs. Theodred's horse screams as a pike finds its belly, and the young lord is thrown, rolling in mud and ice. A boot stamps near his head. He looks up into a face he expects to be orc. It is Dunlending, a young man, blood on his teeth, eyes wide with terror and fury. For a heartbeat, both freeze. The young Dunlending raises his axe. Theodred lifts his sword, bracing for betrayal made real. Instead, the axe comes down on an Uruk-hai behind him, splitting helm and skull. Hot blood splashes Theodred's cheek. The Dunlending grabs his collar and hauls him up with a strength born from desperation. "Do not die here, horse lord," the man snarls. "Not yet, not yet," as if fate itself has been delayed. In the press, Frithwin fights like a man who has already buried his own sons in his mind. He takes a pike through the shoulder and snaps it off, roaring. He shoves forward, making space for Rohirrim's spears to stab. The marshal, who spat wolf words, finds himself shoulder to shoulder with a Dunlending, both panting, both splattered with the same black blood. They exchange one look, and in it is a truce more honest than any treaty. Neither wants to be eaten by the same wolf. Above them, the sky stays low and grey. It offers no omen, no blessing, only cold. On a hill near Isengard, a crow sits on a dead branch and watches. Its eyes reflect the red glow of the wizard's furnaces. It tilts its head, as if listening to a different master than the one it has served before. Saruman stands at the window of Orthanc and sees the battle through a Palantir's cold sight. His face, once fair, is tightened into an expression that is almost irritation, almost disbelief. "They were always easy," he murmurs to himself. "A little hunger, a little promise." His hand tightens on the stone. The seeing stone shows him Frithwin's banner beside Theodred's. It shows him Uruk-hai bodies floating down the Isen like broken logs. A voice behind him speaks from the shadow of the chamber. "Perhaps," it says, "you asked too much." Saruman does not turn. "No," he replies. "I asked exactly what I required." The voice belongs to one of his counselors, a man in a dark robe with ink-stained fingers, an Isengard clerk who has learned to measure lives in tallies. The clerk clears his throat, nervous. "If Dunland turns," he says, "the road to Helm's Deep is less certain." Saruman's laugh is soft, and it chills the room more than the winter outside. "Then I will make it certain," he says. "Send the word to the wild men who have not yet chosen. Burn their fields, take their daughters. Let the hill tribes learn what neutrality costs." He pauses, and his eyes flick down to a parchment on his table, sealed with a white wax hand. "And send riders to Edoras," he adds, "to Grima. Tell him the king must not rise." The battle at the fords ends with the river choked. Theodred survives, but survival is not victory. Uruk-hai withdraw in grim order, leaving behind scorched earth and a trail of stakes hammered to frozen ground, each bearing a severed head. Some are Rohirrim, some are Dunlendings. Saruman is making his reply in a language both peoples understand. In the aftermath, Theodred stands among the wounded. He smells blood, smoke, wet wool. He sees a Dunlending woman kneeling beside a fallen warrior, her hands pressed to his throat, whispering something that might be prayer or curse. A Rohirrim boy, no older than 14, stares at the woman as if she is a creature from a story. He clutches a broken spear and trembles. The marshal approaches Theodred, limping, his face hard. "We cannot bring them into the mark," he says, voice low. "Not these. Not after everything." Theodred looks at the heads on the stakes. He looks at the river. "If we do not," he says, "Saruman will." He turns to Frithwin, who stands with his wounded arm bound in torn cloth. The chieftain's jaw is clenched against pain. "If we go east," Frithwin says, "your people will spit. They will throw stones." Theodred nods once. "They will," he says, "and if we go west, Saruman will throw fire." For a moment, both men look past each other, as if seeing the ghosts of all the dead between them. Then Theodred extends his hand, not as a lord granting mercy, but as a soldier choosing a flank. Frithwin grips it. His hand is rough, calloused, cold. "Then we go east," he says. In Idoras, the second turning point comes as a door opens in Meduseld and lets in air that smells like the world outside the sickness. Theodred arrives not alone, but with Dunlending spears behind him. The hall goes silent in a way that is almost violent. Men's hands go to sword hilts. Women draw back. A child begins to cry and is hushed too quickly. Theoden's eyes widen, and for a moment the old king sits straighter, as if the sight has struck him awake with shock. Grimmer steps forward, his smile thin and poisonous. "My lord," Grimmer says, his voice smooth, "your son brings wolves into your house." Theodred's boots thud on the polished floor. He does not bow at once. He looks at his father and sees the weight on him. He sees the decay. He sees Grimmer standing like a chain. "Father," Theodred says, "Saruman has betrayed Dunland. He has turned them into meat for his war. They have turned from him. They have fought for us at the fords." Grimmer makes a soft sound, like pity. "Fought," he repeats, "or staged a show." Eowyn, from her place near the dais, watches Frithwin's men shift uneasily under the stairs. One of them bears the brand of the White Hand across his forearm, fresh, angry. Another has a bandage around his head that leaks blood. These are not men who have come to feast. They have come to beg, and that begging is an insult they will remember. Theoden's lips part. His voice is rough. "Why?" he asks, and the question is not only to Frithwin, but to fate. Why now, when Rohan is already cracked? Frithwin steps forward. He bows his head, and for the first time in his life, he bows to a king of the mark. It costs him something. It is visible in the tightening around his eyes. "Because the wizard will kill us either way," Frithwin says. "Because my people have lived in cold hills with empty bellies, and we believed your grass was the reason. Now I have seen the pits of Isengard. I have heard the screams from under the ground. It was not your grass that starved us. It was his hand on our throats." His gaze lifts, and it meets Theoden's. "Let us bleed beside you," he says, "and afterward you may send us back to our stones if you wish. But do not send us back now to die alone." A murmur runs through the hall. Some faces soften, not with forgiveness, but with recognition of fear. Grimmer's eyes narrow. He steps closer to Theoden's chair, his hand hovering as if to steady the king. "My lord," he whispers. You are being played. These men will take your hall in the night. Theoden's hand trembles toward Grimma, toward the familiar comfort of poison. Then Theodred speaks again, and his voice cuts like steel on stone. Father, he says, if you do nothing, you will lose the Westfold. You will lose the Eastfold. You will lose everything, and you will die in this chair while a worm speaks for you. Is that your will? The hall holds its breath. Grimma's face flashes with anger so naked it is almost a revelation. It is gone in a heartbeat, replaced by wounded loyalty. But Éowyn sees it, and in seeing it, she feels something in her chest go cold and then sharp. Theoden's eyes move from Grimma to Theodred to Frithwin. Somewhere deep in him, old oaths stir. He remembers the words spoken by Eorl to Cirion, the promise of riders coming when Gondor calls. He remembers the smell of open grass after rain. He remembers being a man who could stand. He lifts his hand. Stay, he says, and his voice is weak, but it is a king's voice. Stay in Edoras tonight, under guard if need be. We will speak at dawn. Grimma bows, hiding his frustration. He knows delay is his weapon. He knows sickness grows in delay. That night, Éowyn walks the corridors of Meduseld with a lamp. The light wavers on carved horses and old shields. She hears voices in the guest hall where the Dunlendings have been placed. Low speech, unfamiliar cadences. She pauses, listening. A woman's voice speaks within, quiet but steady. Do you trust them? The woman asks. A man answers. Trust? No, but I trust the wizard less. Éowyn's hand tightens on the lamp. She steps away before she is seen, her mind a storm of questions. Can two peoples who have only known each other as enemies learn to be more before war decides for them? And if they cannot, what does Saruman become with their hatred as his tool? In the stables, an old groom named Fastred runs his hand along the flank of a trembling horse. The animal smells fear. Fastred smells it too, in the way men speak softer than usual, in the way doors close a little quicker. He remembers Dunlending raids when he was a boy, remembers hiding under a cart while his mother prayed. Now he is asked to give oats to a Dunlending pony. He does it with shaking hands, and when a Dunlending boy, thin and soot-faced, looks up at him, Fastred finds he cannot hold the hatred in his chest in the same shape. The boy's eyes are just eyes, hungry, tired, alive. At dawn, before councils can harden into arguments, Grimma moves. He slips from Meduseld with a hood over his hair, a small bundle under his arm. He walks like a servant going to fetch water. No one stops him. No one has ever stopped him, because he has made himself into something invisible. Outside the hall, frost coats the grass. Edoras wakes slowly. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin blue threads. Somewhere a rooster calls. The world pretends it is ordinary. Grimma makes for the storehouse where messages are kept before they are sealed. He knows which seal belongs to which rider. He knows which man drinks too much and which man cannot read well. He knows where the king's weakness is stored like grain. He reaches the door and it opens before he touches it. Éowyn stands there, lamp in hand though the sun is up, her eyes shadowed as if she has not slept. You leave early, she says. Grimma smiles. Lady, he says, I serve the king. There is always need. Éowyn steps aside, letting him pass into the narrow space between stacked sacks and barrels. The smell of dried meat and old straw fills the air. Do you serve him? Éowyn asks softly. Or do you serve the wizard? Grimma's smile tightens. "You speak treason," he says. Eowyn sets the lamp down on a barrel. The light flickers on her face. "I speak what everyone fears to say," she replies. "You fear those men in our hall because they make your whispers less powerful." Grima's eyes sharpen. He sees, perhaps for the first time, that she is not only a girl trapped by duty, she is a blade that has been kept in a sheath too long. He takes a step toward her. "You are lonely," he says, voice softening. "You are tired. Let me help you." Eowyn's hand moves, and a dagger appears as if it has grown from her sleeve. She presses the point to his throat, just enough to dimple skin. "Leave," she says, "now, or I will open your throat and let your voice spill on the floor." For a heartbeat, Grima is very still. Then his eyes flick to the door. He calculates distance. He calculates sound. He chooses a different weapon. "I came to fetch medicine," he says, his voice suddenly trembling. "For the king. You would deny him that?" Eowyn's jaw tightens. She hates him, but she loves her uncle. That love is the gap Grima needs. Her dagger wavers a fraction. Grima moves like a snake. His hand flashes up, grabbing her wrist, twisting. The dagger clatters. He shoves her back into a stack of sacks. Grain spills, hissing. She gasps as dust fills her mouth. Grima bolts out the door. Eowyn coughs, eyes stinging, and in the cough, she hears hoofbeats outside. Fastrid the groom shouts. Men curse. A horn sounds. Startled, not yet the full alarm. Grima is running for a horse. On the far side of the courtyard, a Dunlending guard, posted as much to watch his own people as to be watched, sees the figure sprinting. He does not know the politics of Edoras. He knows flight. He knows guilt. He throws a spear. It strikes Grima in the back, just below the shoulder blade. The force spins him. He falls hard, face first into frost. Blood blooms dark. For a moment, there is stunned silence. Then shouts erupt, overlapping in confusion and horror. Eowyn staggers out into the yard, grain dust on her cloak. She sees Grima twitching, trying to crawl. She sees the Dunlending guards staring at his own hands as if they have betrayed him. She sees Rohirrim men drawing swords, their faces contorted. The turning point becomes a knife edge. A single death could ignite a war inside a war. Theodred charges into the yard, his face pale. He takes in the scene in one sweep. Grima bleeding, the Dunlending spear, the gathering anger. He draws his sword and steps between the Dunlending guard and the Rohirrim. "Hold," he roars. His voice cracks through the yard like a whip. Men freeze, shocked to be commanded. The Dunlending guard speaks one word in his own tongue, a word that sounds like apology and defiance tangled together. Grima looks up, his face smeared with ice and blood. His eyes find Theodred, and in them is hatred so pure it is almost beautiful in its clarity. "You," Grima wheezes. "You will doom them." Theodred kneels beside him. "Speak," he says. "What did you carry?" Grima's lips curl. "You cannot stop what is already moving," he whispers. His gaze shifts, not to Theodred, but past him, toward Meduseld, as if he can see Orthanc through the walls. Then his eyes glaze, and his body slackens. The worm-tongue dies on the frost of Edoras, pierced by a spear thrown by the very people he would have used as a weapon. Eowyn feels no triumph. She feels a strange emptiness, and behind it, dread. If Grima was a chain, he was also a warning. Chains do not exist without hands that forge them. In Meduseld, Theoden hears the commotion and demands to know why. When he is told, he closes his eyes and a long breath leaves him. It is as if something has lifted, and the weight of it has been crushing him so slowly He did not know its shape until it is gone. But relief is never pure. In that same breath, Theoden understands that Saruman has lost his voice inside the hall. The wizard will not forgive that. The wizard will not wait. What has begun, the Theoden says, voice steadier than it has been in months, must now be finished. The third turning point comes with horses. Not the horses of Rohan alone, but a mixed host moving west. Riders and footmen, male and wolfskins, banners that look wrong beside each other, but are carried with the same stubborn grip. The road to Helm's Deep is churned to mud under thousands of feet. Rain comes, cold and persistent, turning cloaks heavy, turning hair into dark ropes against faces. Ordinary people watch this host pass and do not know whether to cheer or bar their doors. In a hamlet near the White Mountains, a woman named Hild brings her children to the road. She has wrapped their feet in cloth because boots are scarce. She holds a baby against her chest, the infant's breath warm through her tunic. She watches Dunlendings march past, their faces stern, and her stomach knots. A Dunlending man glances down at her children. For a second, Hild expects a sneer, a rude gesture, something to confirm all the stories. Instead, he reaches into his pouch, pulls out a strip of dried meat, and tosses it gently to the oldest boy. The boy catches it, stunned. The Dunlending man keeps walking. He does not smile, he does not speak. It is not kindness as the Rohirrim understand it. It is a soldier's acknowledgement of hunger, and it lands heavier than any speech. Far away, beyond the plains, news travels on stranger paths. In Fangorn Forest, where the trees stand like ancient judges, Merry and Pippin are not yet certain whether they are alive or dreaming. They have fled orcs. They have met ents. They have felt the slow anger of wood waking. Treebeard, oldest of them, listens to the forest. His eyes, deep as wells, narrow as he hears distant rumbling that is not thunder. The young wizard makes fires, Treebeard rumbles. He has always made fires. Merry, perched on a root like a child on a hearthstone, asks quietly, "Will the forest go to war?" Treebeard's fingers, like gnarled branches, curl. "We will see," he says, and the words are heavy with centuries. We will see. On the road, Theoden rides. His posture is still stiff, his face lined, but his eyes are clearer. Beside him rides Theodred, and between them there is a conversation that could have happened years ago if poison had not sat in the king's ear. "You trust them," Theoden says. Not a question, but an attempt at understanding. Theodred glances toward the Dunlending ranks. "I trust what I saw at the fords," he says. "I trust that Saruman's cruelty is greater than their hatred. For now, Theoden repeats softly. He knows that alliances forged in fear can crack when fear passes. He knows also that without them, Rohan might not see spring. At Helm's Deep, the Hornburg rises from stone like a clenched fist. The deeping walls stand slick with rain. The caverns behind it smell of damp earth and old smoke. Refugees crowd into the coombe. Women with bundles, boys with blunt knives, old men with eyes hollow from watching the world change too fast. Gamling the Old takes stock of the defenses. His voice is gravel. "We have fewer bows than we need," he says. "We have fewer men than we need." Theoden looks at the walls, at the narrow gap of the culvert, at the dark mouth of the deep where so many will shelter. He thinks of Gondor far away, with its own walls, its own desperate math. He thinks of the Shire, green and ignorant, where little people smoke pipes and believe the world is stable. Is stability ever anything but a story told by those far from the borders? Frithwin stands with his chieftains near the gate. The Rohirrim stare at them. Some spit, some avert their eyes. Frithwin absorbs it like rain on stone. He has decided to endure insult if it means his people live. A young Dunlending woman, the same who was seen by the river, approaches Frithwin. Her name is Medwyn. Her hair is braided tight, her hands scarred from work and war. They will never accept us, she says quietly. Frithwin looks at the Hornburg. They do not need to accept us tonight, he replies. They need to hold. Medwyn's gaze is sharp. And after? She presses. Frithwin does not answer at once. After is a country no one has mapped. He speaks at last, and his voice is low. After, there we will see who tells the story, he says. Night falls early under thick clouds. Torches are lit along the wall, their flames guttering in the damp wind. The sound of drums rolls through the dark, steady, inhuman. Saruman's army approaches, a black tide filling the valley, their torches painting the rain orange. The Rohirrim tighten their grips. Dunlendings tighten theirs. Somewhere in the caverns, a child begins to sing softly to keep from crying, a thin song that trembles like a candle flame. Saruman's voice comes on the wind, carried by some craft of his, amplified, cruelly calm. Men of Rohan, it calls. Why do you fight? The old king will fall, the mark will burn. Lay down your arms, and you may yet live. Theoden steps forward on the wall, rein on his helm. You have no power here, he shouts back, and the words are for his own men as much as for the wizard. Below, a figure steps into torchlight near the front lines. It is a man, not an orc, wearing a white cloak stained with travel. For a heartbeat, Theoden thinks impossibly that it is Saruman himself come in person. Then lightning flashes, and the figure's hair shines not white, but silver gold. Gandalf stands in the rain, staff in hand, his face grave. He has come sooner than in the old tale, drawn by a different current. Grima's death, the sudden movement of Rohan, the whisper of alliance that should not exist. He looks up at the wall, and his eyes meet Theoden's. There is no time for greeting. The wizard lifts his staff, and his voice rings out. Saruman has broken faith with all, Gandalf cries. He will break you too, if you kneel. Hold, and the dawn may yet come. Hope is a dangerous thing. It can lift men or break them when it fails. Saruman answers not with words, but with arrows. The first volley hisses up, a black swarm, and slams into the wall. Men grunt. A Dunlending on the battlements takes an arrow through the eye and falls without a sound, his body hitting the stone with a wet thud. The Rohirrim beside him flinch, then step closer to cover the gap he leaves. The battle begins. Hours blur into a nightmare of rain and fire. Ladders scrape stone. Hooks catch on parapets. Men stab downward until arms go numb. Orc voices snarl. Dunlending voices shout. Rohirrim horns blare short and sharp. The culvert becomes the focus of Saruman's cunning. He has not forgotten his explosive fire. He has brought it in barrels, guarded by Uruk-hai, who do not fear death because they were bred for it. A Rohirrim archer named Haleth sees the torch-bearing Uruk-hai moving towards the wall's base. He shouts, "Warning!" A Dunlending beside him, Maedwyn, leans over the parapet and sees it too. Her breath catches. She has seen Saruman's fire once, in a raid on a Dunlending village that refused to give up its boys. She has smelled the sweet, sick scent of it before it burns. She knows what will happen. "Down!" she screams, in her own tongue, and then in broken Rohirric. Down from the wall. Too late. The blast shakes the valley. Stone erupts. Men are thrown like dolls. The deeping wall cracks, and a gap opens, steaming, jagged, spitting dust and smoke. For a moment, all sound is replaced by ringing silence, and the kind that follows lightning too close. Then the Uruk-hai roar and surge toward the breach. This is where the altered timeline threatens to fold back into tragedy. This is where hatred could snap the new alliance like a dry twig. The Rohirrim rush to plug the gap. The Dunlendings rush too. They collide, not as enemies, but as bodies forced into the same narrow place. A Rohirrim boy with a spear stumbles, knocked by the press. A Uruk-hai axe rises over him. Maedwyn sees, and without thinking, she throws herself forward. The axe comes down, not on the boy's skull, but into Maedwyn's shoulder, biting deep. She screams, a raw sound. She drives her own knife up into the Uruk-hai's throat, close enough to smell its breath, close enough to feel its blood hot on her face. She falls, gasping, eyes wide with shock at the pain. The Rohirrim boy stares at her, frozen. Then he drops to his knees and grips her with both hands, trying to pull her back. "Hold on," he says, voice cracking. "Hold on." Maedwyn's lips move. No sound comes. Her eyes shift toward Frithwin, across the chaos. He sees her fall. Something in his face tightens, and he charges toward her with a bellow that is not a war cry, but a name torn from his chest. He reaches her as the press closes. He tries to lift her, but her body is already going slack. Maedwyn dies in the breach, her blood washing into Rohan's stone, and with her death something changes. A Dunlending has died saving a Rohirrim child. The story has been written in blood, and blood stories spread faster than any messenger. Frithwin's roar becomes a command. "Forward!" he shouts, and his men, seeing their own dead, fight with a fury that has nothing to do with hatred of Rohan and everything to do with hatred of Isengard. Rohirrim riders dismounted fight beside them, shouting, their voices blending. Above, Theoden watches the breach and feels grief twist into a cold resolve. He sees Maedwyn fall. He sees the boy trying to save her. He sees, with startling clarity, that this war is now made of ordinary choices, not only kings and wizards. He draws his sword. "To the breach," he commands. The king of Rohan goes down into the smoke. In the midst of this, a small betrayal blooms like mold in damp. One of Frithwin's sub-chiefs, a man named Orm, has never wanted this alliance. He has worn it like a borrowed cloak, waiting for the moment to throw it off. Saruman promised him land, promised him rule over the Westfold if he opened a gate at the right time. As the breach fights rage, Orm slips away toward the postern gate that opens to the rear path, the narrow way that could let Uruk-hai spill into the Hornburg from behind. He reaches the gatehouse, hands slick with rain. He signals to a shadow beyond, where Uruk-hai wait like wolves. Before he can lift the bar, a hand clamps on his shoulder. It is not Rohirrim. It is a Dunlending, older, with grey in his beard, one of Frithwin's own. The man's name is Caddoc, and he has been watching Orm all night. "You would sell us again," Caddoc growls, voice thick with disgust. Orm bares his teeth. "I would save us," he hisses. "Do you think they will ever give us anything? They will hang us when this is done." Caddoc's eyes are sad for a heartbeat. "Maybe," he says, "but at least we will have chosen how we stood." Orm moves fast, drawing a knife. Caddoc takes the blade in the ribs, grunts, and then drives his own spear into Orm's belly, pushing until the point bursts out the other side. Orm's eyes widen. His mouth opens in a silent curse. He collapses, blood pouring onto the wet stone. Caddoc slumps against the gate, breathing hard. He grips the bar with shaking hands and slams it down, locking it. Outside, Uruk-hai snarl and pound. The gate holds. Caddoc slides down the wall, his hands red. He looks at Orm's body, then closes his eyes. When he dies, no song is sung. The battle is too loud. At dawn, the Hornburg still stands, but the valley is a charnel pit. Smoke rises in greasy coils. The rain has slowed to a mist that clings to faces and makes every breath taste like ash. Theoden emerges from the breach alive. His armor dented, his sword nicked. He looks older, but he looks awake. Gandalf is gone from the valley. He left in the night, as in the old tale, but his errand is different now. He has ridden not only to gather Erkenbrand and the scattered riders, but to carry word to Fangorn. The wizards' engines have cracked the wall, and if the Ents are to move, they must move now. In Fangorn, Treebeard feels the message like a tremor through roots. He gathers the Ents. The Entmoot begins, slow as always, but anger speeds it. Merry and Pippin watch the ancient beings argue, their voices like wind through branches. "Is it time?" Pippin whispers, and his small voice feels absurd in the forest's vastness. Treebeard's eyes close. "It is time," he says. The fourth turning point arrives with water. As dawn brightens the eastern clouds, horns sound from the ridge. The Erkenbrand's riders appear, sunlight catching on spears. They charge down into the valley, and the Uruk-hai falter, surprised by the sudden brightness, by the renewed force. Theoden rallies those within the Hornburg and rides out. And for a moment, the battle becomes a hammer and anvil, crushing Saruman's host between stone and horse. Dunlendings run among the fleeing, their axes rising and falling. Rohirrim riders gallop, hooves pounding mud. The Uruk-hai break, disciplined lines shattering into panic. The valley fills with screams, with the metallic tang of blood, with the sharp smell of trampled grass. Many Uruk-hai flee toward the forest, as in the old tale, and there the trees move. Ents loom out of mist, their limbs like living pillars. They wade into the fleeing orcs, scooping them up and dashing them against rocks, their deep voices rumbling with wrath. The orcs die in heaps under roots and fists. But Saruman has prepared. He has sent fires into Fangorn's edge in the night, barrels of his blasting flame rolled into gullies, torches thrown into dry brush. The forest, damp with rain, does not blaze as he hoped, but it smoulders, and smoke coils among trunks like a serpent. Treebeard reaches the burning edge and stops. He looks at the blackened bark, the wounded saplings. A sound comes from him, low and terrible, like a mountain grieving. He steps forward anyway. Water follows him, because Ents remember water. They tear down the dikes of Isengard's river. They smash the gates. They let the Isen's tributaries loose. A flood roars toward the ring of Isengard, crashing into walls, sweeping aside engines, drowning pits. Saruman stands atop Orthanc, watching his world drown. His face is white with fury. He raises his arms, and his voice rolls out, trying to bend the flood with words of command. The water does not listen. An Ent, huge even among Ents, wades into the flood and lifts a stone like a toy, hurling it against the iron gates. The gates buckle. The water surges in. Treebeard himself strides toward the central sluices, his bark soaked, his eyes burning. He plants his feet and reaches down into the rushing channel to tear free a massive wheel. A blast erupts beneath the water. Saruman's last stored fire, hidden like a venom sac, detonates. The explosion sends a fountain of scalding water and steam into the air. Ents stagger, roaring. The force slams into Treebeard's legs. When the steam clears, Treebeard is down. Merry feels the world tilt. He clutches Pippin's shoulder. Treebeard, he breathes. The Ent's great head lies half submerged, water rushing past. His eyes are open, staring at the grey sky, and in them is pain so ancient it seems to predate language. The Ents around him bellow. Their anger becomes a storm. They tear at Isengard with renewed ferocity, but the cost is paid. Treebeard does not rise again. Saruman laughs from Orthanc, and the sound is thin and distant, but it carries. He has lost his fortress, but he has killed something irreplaceable. He has wounded the world. Yet even this is not clean victory. The flood that breaks Isengard also sends a surge down the Isen, swelling the river toward the lowlands where Dunlendings have their scattered villages. Frithwin's people, already starved by Saruman's raids, will find their homes waterlogged, their stores ruined. The Alliance has a hidden price, and it will be paid by those who have the least. When Theoden's host marches to the ring of Isengard and sees it drowned, sees the Ents standing like sentinels among wreckage, sees Orthanc still unbroken, black and sharp as a spear point, relief washes through them. Saruman's war machine is crushed. The West is saved. Is it the end? It could be. It feels like one. Then Gandalf arrives with grim eyes and speaks of Gondor. Minas Tirith is besieged, he says. Sauron has moved. The war you have fought here is only one front. Theoden's jaw tightens. The mark is exhausted. Men are wounded, horses limping, armor cracked. Dunlendings have bled too, their dead unburied in a foreign valley. The temptation to say, "We have done enough," is strong. But Rohan's oath to Gondor is older than Theoden's weariness, older than Dunland's hatred, older even than Saruman's treachery. "What of Saruman?" asks a marshal, staring up at Orthanc where a small figure watches from a high window. Gandalf's gaze is cold. He is caged in his own pride, he says. Leave him to his tower. There is no time. In this altered world, however, Saruman is not content to be left. He has lost his armies, his furnaces drowned, his voice in Edoras cut out. He has one weapon left, knowledge. He calls down from Orthanc when Theoden and Gandalf stand in the flooded circle. His voice, though diminished, still has a honeyed power that makes men's skin prickle. "You ride to your deaths," Saruman says. "To the White City. You think you can arrive in time? You think you can change the Shadow's course?" Gandalf looks up. "You cannot see all ends," he says. Saruman's laughter is bitter. "I see enough," he replies. "I see the hillmen who think they have won a place at your table. Ask them what their grandfathers did to the Rohirrim. Ask the Rohirrim what they did in return. Then ask what will happen when the war is over and there is land to divide." Frithwin hears, and his hands clench. He looks at Theoden's men and sees suspicion flicker, fed by Saruman's words, like fire fed by oil. Saruman continues, voice turning soft. "Frithwin," he calls, and the chieftain's name on Saruman's tongue feels like a hand around his throat. "They will never accept you. When the Great War ends, they will sing songs of their own heroism and forget you're dead. Leave them now. Take what you can. Go home. Let the horse lords drown in their oaths. What does a man do when an enemy speaks truths sharpened into weapons?" Frithwin steps forward, boots splashing. He looks up at Orthanc. "You killed my sons," he shouts. "You burned my hills." Saruman's voice purrs. "And they will burn yours again when it is convenient," he answers. "It is in their blood." Theoden watches Frithwin, and he feels the fragile alliance tremble. He cannot offer love. He cannot undo centuries. He can only offer choice. He dismounts. He walks toward Frithwin through shallow water, and every Rohirrim eye follows him. Theoden stops an arm's length away and speaks quietly, so only those closest hear. "I cannot change what was done," he says. "Not by my father's, not by yours. But I can choose what I do now." He takes his sword and turns it, offering the hilt to Frithwin, blade down. "In Gondor," Theoden says, "ride with me, bleed with me, and when it is done, if we live, we will speak of land and wrongs, and recompense with open eyes, not with wizard whispers. I will not promise you a throne. I will promise you a place at the fire while we speak." Frithwin stares at the offered sword. His breath fogs. Around them, the water laps. Orthanc looms, listening. Frithwin takes the sword hilt in his rough hand, not to claim it, but to seal the moment. He pushes it gently back. "Keep your blade, King," he says. "I will keep my own. But I will ride." Above, Saruman's face twists, and for the first time, his control slips enough that his hatred shows like a crack in marble. The host rides east. On the long road, the fifth turning point arrives in the form of fear wearing a familiar face. As the Rohirrim and Dunlendings approach the outskirts of Gondor, they pass through Anorian's ruined farms. The land smells of smoke and trampled grain. Black birds wheel overhead. The sky is bruised with ash. Gondorian refugees look up from ditches and broken carts and see riders coming. Relief flares, then falters as they notice the wolfskins among them, the darker hair, the strange banners. A Gondorian soldier steps into the road, spear raised, voice sharp. "Who are these?" he demands. "Is this another trick of the enemy?" Yoma, now riding at Theoden's side, grips his reins. His eyes flash. "They are allies," he snaps. "Move." But fear is stubborn. Rumors have traveled ahead. Wild men, hill tribes, servants of Saruman. The names blur in the mouths of frightened folk until all become one threat. In a village near the Ramus Echo, stones fly. A Dunlending woman carrying a water skin is struck in the temple. She drops, blood running into dust. Her husband lunges forward with a knife. Gondorian men raise spears. Rohirrim riders shout. The whole fragile thing threatens to shatter in a roadside squabble. Theoden rides into the middle of it, his horse stamping. He raises his voice, and it cuts through the noise. "Enough," he commands. "Do you think the enemy cares what tongue you speak when you bleed?" A Gondorian elder, face-lined, steps forward. "We have heard of Dunland," he says, voice trembling. "We have heard of raids." Frithwin dismounts slowly. He lets his hands be seen empty. He looks at the elder and speaks with effort, in the common speech that still feels like a foreign tool. "We have raided," Frithwin admits, "and you have had peace while we starved in hills. Now your peace is gone. Now you smell what we have smelled." The elder's eyes flicker to the smoke on the horizon, to the blackness over Minas Tirith. He swallows. Frithwin continues, voice low. "If you want to throw stones, throw them later," he says. "Right now, there are wings in the sky and towers of teeth at your gates." A silence falls, heavy. Then, unexpectedly, a child steps forward from behind the Gondorian elder, a girl with a dirty face and hair like straw. She looks at the Dunlending woman bleeding on the ground and begins to cry. Her crying, small and helpless, breaks the adult's posture of pride. Someone lowers a spear. Someone kneels to help the injured woman. The moment passes without becoming massacre, but the disquiet remains, seeded. Saruman's words from Orthanc echo without being heard. At Minas Tirith, the White City rises, layered like a wedding cake of stone, beautiful and weary. Its walls are stained with soot from siege fires. The air smells of fear, of sweat, of horse dung, and of old glory crumbling under pressure. Denethor, steward of Gondor, stands on the battlements and watches the road. His eyes are sunken. His hands grip the stone too tightly. The Palantir has shown him too much, and it has not shown him the one thing he needs: hope. When he sees riders coming, he leans forward, almost eager. When he sees wolfskins among them, his face hardens. "So," he murmurs, voice like a blade drawn slow. "Rohan brings its enemies to my gate." A guard captain speaks cautiously. "They come against Mordor, my lord." Denethor's laugh is brief and joyless. "Against Mordor," he repeats. "All men come against Mordor in words. In deeds, they come for what they can take." Faramir, pale from exhaustion, stands nearby. He watches the arriving host with eyes that still hold compassion despite everything. He sees Dunlendings riding and walking beside Rohirrim, and he feels the shape of a story changing. "Father," Faramir says gently, "if enemies can ride together, perhaps there is more strength in the world than despair admits." Denethor's gaze snaps to him, cold. "Do not teach me hope," he says. "Hope has killed more men than despair ever did." The Battle of the Pelennor begins under a sky smeared with smoke. The Witch King's forces press against the city like a black sea. Trolls batter gates. Catapults hurl stones that shatter roofs. The air is full of screams and the relentless clang of iron. Rohan's horns sound, and the Rohirrim charge as they did in the old tale, their cry rolling like thunder. But now, among the riders and behind them, Dunlending footmen run, their boots pounding the earth, their banners snapping in the wind. They are not suited for open-field cavalry war, but they have something else: stubbornness in the mud, a willingness to stand and hold ground that riders often cannot. They form a rough line to protect Rohan's flanks from Haradrim reinforcements. They lock shields, they brace spears, they grunt and curse and bleed. A Haradrim Mumak lumbers, its great feet shaking the ground, its tusks adorned with cruel blades. Men scatter, horses scream. A Dunlending named Cavan, barely more than a youth, freezes as the beast's shadow falls over him. He smells its animal musk, hot and overwhelming. He hears its handlers shouting in a tongue he does not know. He sees the blades on its tusks and imagines his body split like firewood. A Rohirrim rider, thrown from his horse, crawls nearby, his leg broken. He looks up at Cavan with wide eyes. "Run," he gasps. "Run, you fool." Cavan does not run. He does not know why. Perhaps pride. Perhaps the memory of Medwyn dying in a breach far from home. Perhaps the simple fact that there is nowhere left to run that is not also death. He plants his spear, hands shaking, and waits. The Mumak charges. At the last moment, arrows fly, thick as rain. They are not Gondorian. They are not Rohirrim. They are Dunlending arrows, shot by men from the hills who have hunted wolves and deer in fog, who know how to put a shaft into a moving eye. One arrow strikes the Mumak's eye. The beast bellows, stumbling. Another strikes its handler. The great animal swerves, crashing into an orc formation, trampling black bodies into mud. Cavan is knocked aside by the gust of its passing. He lands hard, ribs bruised, but alive. He hears the Rohirrim rider laugh once, incredulous, then cough blood. Did you see that? The rider wheezes, and it is almost wonder. On the city walls, a Gondorian archer watches this and feels his certainty wobble. He has been taught that the world is divided cleanly, allies and enemies, noble and savage. In the mud below, those lines blur into something messier and more human. Then the Witch King descends, and the world narrows again to terror. Théoden rides to meet him, as in the old tale, and the clash comes with the same cruel inevitability. Snow of ash falls. The king's horse, Snowmane, is struck by dread and falls. Théoden is pinned beneath, his breath knocked out, his vision filling with grey. Éowyn stands over him in armour, her face hidden, and she confronts the Nazgul with words that burn. Beside her stands Merry, small and trembling, but resolute. In this altered timeline, a third figure arrives, unexpected, Frithwin. He has fought his way through the press, his axe red to the haft. He sees the fallen king, sees the winged horror above, feels the cold of its presence like a hand squeezing his heart. He has no love for Théoden. He has no oath to him older than days. But he has made a choice, and choices demand payment. Frithwin steps beside Éowyn without knowing who she is. "Go," Éowyn hisses to him, thinking him merely another man rushing to die. "This is not your fight." Frithwin's laugh is harsh. "All fights are mine now," he says. The Witch King raises his mace. The air seems to dim around it. Frithwin's mind flashes with a memory of Orthank's pits, of screams under stone, and rage floods him hot enough to cut through fear. When the mace falls, Frithwin throws himself into its path, not with a shield, but with his own body and axe raised to strike at the Nazgul's arm. The mace slams into him. Bones shatter. His body crumples. Pain flares white, then fades into distant thunder. But the blow is slowed, deflected just enough. Éowyn's sword finds its mark. Merry's blade strikes from below. The Witch King's scream rends the air, and the shadow collapses, undone by those it underestimated. Frithwin lies in the churned mud, his eyes open, rain and ash on his lashes. He cannot feel his legs. He cannot feel his hands. He hears distant shouting as if from underwater. Éowyn kneels beside him, her helm removed now, her face streaked with grime and tears. She presses cloth to his broken ribs, though she knows it is useless. "Why?" she whispers, and the question is raw. Why would a man die for a king who once would have killed him? Frithwin's lips move. His voice is barely a breath. "Because," he whispers, "I was tired of being used." His eyes shift toward the fallen Théoden, then toward the city, then toward the black horizon where Mordor waits. "Tell them," he breathes. "Tell them we were here." Then his gaze goes unfocused. The chieftain of Dunland dies on the Pelennor, and with him dies the simplest version of this alliance. What remains is heavier, a bond forged not by leaders living, but by leaders falling. The battle turns. Aragorn arrives by the river with the dead at his back, and the tide of Mordor falters. The day is won at a cost so vast it cannot be counted in one lifetime. In the immediate aftermath, relief comes like a warm thing placed on a shivering body. Men sit on broken stones and laugh weakly because they are alive. They drink water that tastes of iron. They stare at the sky as if they have never seen blue before. In the houses of healing, the smell is of herbs and sweat and blood that will not wash out. Éowyn lies pale, her breath shallow. Théoden lies dead, wrapped in cloth, his face finally peaceful. Merry sleeps, small and grey with exhaustion. Aragorn moves among the wounded with hands that bring quiet, and his presence is like a candle lit in a cavern. Dunlendings, allowed within the city only under watch, lie on straw pallets in a corner of a courtyard. Gondorian healers approach them cautiously, their eyes wary, their hands steady. A Dunlending boy, not yet grown, flinches when a healer touches his arm, expecting pain. The healer only ties a clean bandage and murmurs, "Hold still." The boy's eyes fill with tears he refuses to shed. Outside, the city mourns and breathes. Bells toll. Smoke drifts from burned fields. The world feels for a moment as if it might continue. Then disquiet begins, slow and persistent, like a crack in a wall that water will find. Denethor is dead, consumed by his own despair. The crown of Gondor has passed into new hands. Rohan must choose a new king. The alliance with Dunland, sealed in blood, is suddenly without its chief architect. Eomer stands in a quiet chamber, staring at his hands. They are stained, not visibly, but in his mind. He has seen Dunlendings die for him. He has also seen Rohirrim glare at Dunlending wounded, as if they are still thieves. He feels the weight of kingship settle like a cloak that is also a shroud. A Rohirrim marshal approaches him. "We should send them away," the marshal says, voice low. "Now, while the city is busy, they have done their part." Eomer's jaw tightens. "They have done more than their part," he replies. The marshal hesitates. "And if they come to claim land?" he asks. "If they say the Westfold is theirs now?" Eomer looks out a window toward the distant mountains. "Then we will speak," he says. "We will not answer with spears first, not again. Is that enough to change generations? Or is it only a pause between old violences?" In Dunland, survivors return to hills that smell of flood and smoke. The Isen's swollen waters have torn through low settlements, mud cakes doorways. Dead livestock lies half-buried. The air is sour with rot. Women stand in ruined yards and stare at the empty places where children once ran. A Dunlending elder, Medwyn's mother, receives the news of her daughter's death, not with wailing, but with silence. She sits on a broken stool, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. After a long time, she asks, "Did she die alone?" The messenger, a grim man with a bandaged face, shakes his head. "No," he says. A Rohirrim boy held her hand. The elder closes her eyes and one tear tracks down her cheek. "Then the world is changing," she whispers, as if speaking it might keep it true. In Rohan, Eomer leads Theoden's body home. The funeral mound rises under a sky scrubbed clean by wind. The grass is green again, stubbornly alive. Riders circle, singing. The sound carries across the plains, and for a moment the mark feels whole. At the edge of the gathering stand a handful of Dunlendings, invited, guarded, uncertain. They wear no wolf banners now, only plain cloaks. Their faces are solemn. When the song ends, Eomer rides to them. He dismounts. He stands before them, king now, though he feels like a man wearing someone else's weight. "Frithwin died for my uncle," Eomer says, voice steady. "He died for my people." The Dunlendings watch him warily, waiting for the price to be named. Eomer continues. "Rohan will not forget," he says, "not if I have breath." A Dunlending man, Cadoc's brother, steps forward. "Words are wind," he says flatly. Eomer nods once. "Then I will give you something heavier than wind," he replies. He gestures, and Rohirrim men bring forward sacks of grain, bundles of tools, iron nails, seed. Not tribute. Aid. something that will matter in a flooded winter. Murmurs ripple through the Dunlendings. Suspicion fights with need. Need wins, because need always wins first. A woman reaches out, touches a tool handle as if it might vanish. Her eyes flick to Ioma, then away, as if she cannot bear to look directly at the man she has been taught to hate. The transformed world is not a utopia. It is rough, scarred, stitched together with uneasy hands. Saruman remains in Orthanc, trapped but not silent. In the months after Sauron's fall, when the world begins to sort itself into realms and borders again, Saruman's voice becomes a rumor carried by travelers. The fallen wizard speaks to anyone who comes near. He offers knowledge. He offers counsel. He offers bitterness wrapped as truth. Some Dunlendings, angry at their flooded homes and the slow pace of rebuilding, listen from beyond the ring, their hearts raw. Some Rohirrim, resentful that aid goes west when their own farms need mending, listen too. In the Shire, far away, the hobbits return to a land touched by other hands. In this timeline, Saruman does not come as he did in the old tale, for he is still caged. Yet his influence reaches even there, through men who have travelled, through whispers that the world is changing and that small folk will be trampled unless they learn to trample first. The Shire resists in its quiet way, but even there, someone begins to lock doors at night who never locked them before. Questions planted early find their answers in quieter rooms, not on battlefields. Can hatred be unlearned? Yes, but not quickly and not cleanly. Can alliances born of desperation become something more? Sometimes, but only if memory is faced instead of buried. Who tells the story matters, because stories decide who is human and who is monster. Eowyn recovers slowly. In Gondor, she walks in gardens that smell of crushed leaves and new blossoms. Her arm aches where darkness touched her. She thinks often of Frithwin, of his last words. She speaks his name aloud sometimes when no one is near, testing it against the air as if to make it real. Aragorn, now king, speaks with Eomer in Minas Tirith's high halls. Their conversation is long, not for war plans, but for peace, which is harder. The lands between Rohan and Dunland, Aragorn says, voice thoughtful, have been a wound for generations. Eomer's gaze is weary. Wounds fester, he replies. They do not vanish because a new king sits on a new throne. Aragorn nods. Then we will clean it, he says, slowly, with honesty, with borders drawn by agreement, not by fire. Eomer studies him. And if men refuse? He asks quietly. One of the rare rhetorical questions that is not for argument, but for fear. Aragorn's answer is not comforting. Then we will keep working until they tire of refusing, he says, or until we tire of living. In Dunland, a boy named Cavan limps through mud. His leg never healed right after the Mumak's near charge. He carries a sack of grain stamped with Rohan's mark. He hates that stamp. He also knows it will feed his sister. He stops on a ridge and looks east toward where he once marched with enemies, and returned with allies and left his chieftain in foreign mud. He wonders, in the private way of the young, whether his children will still be taught to hate riders. He wonders whether riders will still be taught to spit at hillmen. He wonders whether the world can be remade without being burned down first. In Rohan, Fastred the groom grows older. He tells his grandchildren a story by the hearth, not only of Theoden's charge, not only of Helm's Deep, but of a Dunlending man who tossed dried meat to a hungry child on a cold road. His grandchildren wrinkle their noses. A Dunlending, they say, disbelieving. Fastred nods. Yes, he says. Do not let songs make your heart smaller than the world. Even as peace tries to take root, shadows remain. In the flooded ring of Isengard, the water drains slowly over months. Slime coats broken stone. Dead orcs rot in pits. The air is thick with decay. Orthanc stands untouched, black and patient. One night, long after the war, a Dunlending scavenger slips into the ruined circle, searching for iron. He carries a small lantern. The flame paints trembling light on wet walls. He hears nothing but dripping water and his own breath. He finds a shard of glass half buried in mud, smooth and oddly cold. Not glass, stone. A fragment from some broken device, perhaps. Tossed aside when greater treasures were taken. He wipes it with his sleeve, and for a heartbeat the lantern light catches a depth in it, a dark that seems to look back. He feels a chill that has nothing to do with the night air. Above him, in Orthanc's high window, Saruman watches. His eyes are small in the distance, but they gleam. He cannot leave. He cannot command armies. Yet he can still seed distrust, still feed old hungers, still whisper to the parts of men that want someone else to blame. The scavenger pockets the shard and hurries away, lantern bobbing, unaware of how stories begin. Far to the east, Mordor is quiet, but not healed. Ash still lies in cracks where no rain reaches. In the west, the Shire grows green again, but a few hobbits keep clubs behind their doors. In Rohan, grass waves, and under that wave is earth packed over graves. In Dunland, hills stand under wind, and the wind carries new words and old grudges together. The world has been saved, and it has been altered. The dread that began on a snowy ridge has eased into something like uneasy breathing. The great shadow is gone, but smaller shadows have learned the shape of the cracks. And in the drowned circle of Isengard, under a moon that makes the water shine like a blade, the black tower of Orthanc casts its reflection twice, as if one shadow is not enough.